Caleb dug the grave himself with soil still damp from the morning storm. He laid his wife down beneath the cedar tree that bent low in the wind, the same tree where she once hung their wash on long summer days, the same spot where they had once danced under lightning and cheap whiskey. She had died coughing into her hands, her breath rattling, barely 2 miles from the small settlement that had shut its doors when fever came. By the time he carried her body that way, buzzards already circled in slow, lazy arcs above the ridge. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood still, as though if he stayed frozen long enough, maybe God, or whoever held time in his hand, might give her back. But he didn't. So Caleb pressed the dirt down with his calloused palms, whispering no prayer. After that day, he stopped talking to heaven. He stopped talking much at all. Now it was late summer in Dry Creek, New Mexico, the kind of heat that cracked fence posts and baked bones under open sky. Caleb lived alone in a weathered shack on the edge of the basin, where even the silence had splinters. Once a month he rode into town, bought flour, coffee, and bullets, then rode back out without a word more than needed. Folks had grown used to the sight of him. A tall man, sun-beaten, shoulders bowed from weight, he never sat down. He wasn't looking for trouble that day, but trouble found him anyway. Behind the freight shed near the rail yard, curled up like some discarded thing, lay a young woman. Her hair was black as crow feathers, tangled with dust, her shawl stiff with dried blood. One leg was torn open where something sharp had split skin down to the bone. Her lips were cracked, her face raw from heat. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just stared back at Caleb like someone who'd already been judged and had quit fighting the verdict. Most people walked past her. One man spit in the dirt near her feet, as if misery itself offended him. Caleb didn't ask who she was. He didn't even wonder at first. He just saw something in the way her hands trembled, a kind of tremor he knew too well, the kind that comes from carrying grief too long. So he picked her up, not like a savior, not like a hero, just like a man who knew what it was to watch someone slip away slow. He laid her across his horse, gave her his water, and turned his back on the same town that had once turned its back on him. They rode in silence. She didn't speak, not because she couldn't, but because sometimes silence is the only language that doesn't burn. Wrapped in his old coat, she leaned against him, her breath shallow. Even the horse slowed its pace, careful, as though it, too, knew this was sacred ground they were crossing. Back at the cabin, Caleb laid her on the bed his wife had once died in. He did not flinch. He folded the memory into the corner like an old quilt and went to work. Clean water from the well, boiled cloth, salt for the wound, a curved needle and heavy thread. Not the kind for dresses, but the kind strong enough to mend saddle leather. The gash was bad, but not beyond saving. She never cried out, never cursed him when he stitched flesh. She only stared at the low rafters above her head, as though even the ceiling had betrayed her. Caleb sat in his old rocking chair by the fire, the legs still broken, never fixed. He watched the flames like they owed him an answer. She tossed in her sleep, muttering words in a language he didn't understand. But grief doesn't need translation. By morning, she could drink water without spilling. By dusk, she whispered one word, her name, Elena. Caleb didn't answer, not because he didn't care, but because he knew better than to press too soon. Sometimes people only need to know they won't be left again. So he cooked rabbit stew, fed her slow, let her sleep, let her stay. Quiet kindness in a house that hadn't known it in years. By the third day, Elena could stand. Wobbly, yes. Fragile, yes. But her own 2 feet touched the dirt floor. Caleb only watched. Healing was something you never rushed, not if you wanted it to last. She began helping in small ways, sweeping the floor, pouring water into the pot, braiding her hair again. Sometimes she even hummed. Soft notes, broken melodies like a song that had forgotten how it ended. That was when the first crack in her silence appeared. One morning he found her outside, near the woodpile, staring off toward the mesas. She didn't turn as he approached. Her voice came thin. "They're looking for me." Caleb said nothing. She kept speaking anyway, words falling like stones she'd carried too long. There had been a rancher, she explained. White cattleman, wealthy, sick near to death. His wife begged help. The town doctor declared it hopeless. But Elena, raised by her grandmother, had learned herbs, roots, and medicine whispered from elders. She went to the ranch, stayed 3 nights, and saved him. Caleb nodded. He had seen sickness. He knew the thin line between death and life. But when they found out a native woman had touched him, her voice cracked. They called it witchcraft. Said I cursed him. They beat my brother. They burned my grandmother's hut. My own people turned away too. Said I broke the old ways, betrayed both sides. She lifted her eyes, wet but sharp. So now I belong nowhere. To no one. And in that moment, Caleb understood why she stared at the fire the way she did, as though it remembered her better than people ever could. That night, she whispered something darker. I thought maybe if I died out there, no one would have to carry me anymore. Caleb looked at her long, steady. You weren't meant to die, he said. You were meant to end up here. The words hung heavy, but they stayed. Not long after, trouble rode in. 2 men on horseback, leather creaking, dust boiling up from the trail. Not townsfolk, state men, troopers. They wore badges that glinted in the sun. Caleb met them at the porch. She's my guest, he said evenly, standing tall. They glanced past him and saw Elena stacking wood. They saw the glow of life inside the cabin. You aware of the charges? One trooper asked. Witchcraft, poisoning, hiding from law. Caleb's jaw clenched. He'd heard words like that before. Accusations that stuck deeper than truth. She saved a man's life, Caleb said. If that's a crime, maybe the law needs mending. The troopers hesitated. One cleared his throat. Reports say she was seen at the Barrow Ranch, then vanished. Rancher Thomas Barrow demands retribution. Caleb's voice stayed level. Tell Barrow his life's debt is already paid, healed in full. That night, rumors spread like wildfire through Dry Creek. Witches, curses, Navajo sorcery. At dawn, Caleb awoke to the sound of splintered wood. Sheriff Kramer stood at the door with 2 more troopers, pistols heavy at their belts. We got orders, Kramer said. She comes with us, and anyone shielding her. Caleb stood steady. He could have drawn, could have run. He didn't. He stepped forward, eyes hard. If taking her means losing what's left of me, then so be it. Before the men moved, Elena stepped into the doorway. She raised her wrist. Around it glimmered a bracelet, silver, old, etched with patterns of healing. This was my grandmother's, she said. I gave it to the boy I saved. He sent it back to prove I cured, not cursed. The troopers faltered. Sheriff Kramer shifted uneasy. Finally, he muttered, we'll need to see more proof. But for now, keep your weapons down. They rode off into the dark, leaving only dust in their wake. Caleb placed his hand on Elena's shoulder. She didn't flinch. In that silence, they both knew a line had been crossed and held. Weeks bled into months. No lawman returned. Slowly, townsfolk softened. A woman from the mercantile left peaches on the gate. A boy from the chapel left kindling by the path. No one spoke apology, but kindness trickled back like shade in a long desert day. Elena planted herbs by the porch. Caleb built her a drying shed. Their lives twined, not rushed, not claimed, simply shared. One morning before dawn, Elena found Caleb on the ridge, coffee steaming in hand, eyes fixed on the wide horizon. She sat beside him. For a long while they said nothing. Finally, she whispered, I think we can stop running now. Caleb nodded. Home isn't always a place, he said. Sometimes it's a person who sees you when the rest of the world won't. The sunrise burned the hills red, and for the first time in years, Caleb let himself believe in beginnings. And maybe that's the truth worth carrying, that even in a land as hard as the West, kindness holds power. That redemption isn't about others forgiving you. It's about forgiving yourself for the things you did just to keep living. So I ask you, the one listening, what story are you still too afraid to live? What silence are you still carrying? If Caleb and Elena remind you of anything, let it be this: it's never too late. Not to forgive, not to heal, not to stay, If this tale struck a chord, if it brought someone to mind, give it a like. Subscribe so you don't miss the next ride across these wild, unforgiving plains. Because stories of the West aren't just about dust and guns. They're about the fire that keeps us standing when the world wants to see us